Thanks.
Thank you.
I'll just do it again next week.
That works. Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Okay, well, we're going to get started. So today we are going to be talking about activities management. Now, this really technically is probably a time management class, but I call it activities management because nobody would have showed up if you knew it was time management. Maybe you did, though, and maybe that's why only 2 of you are here in person. I don't know, but we're going to approach it a little bit differently today than how we typically would go about a time management thing, because we're going to relate it to real estate and how to figure out if you're spending your time wisely or not. Now, so I'm going to give you a tool actually in which you can use to help you with that as well. So, but before we do that, I've got, I'm going to do the screen share again here and get this set up here. Oh, actually, so for you guys on Zoom, let me get this to you. For you guys on Zoom, if you will put first and last name and office in the chat box, would be awesome. Let me get this rest of this pulled up here and shared. All right. Now, I don't know, is it better with the lights on or off?
I'm more visible with the lights on.
Okay. All right, so what we're going to talk about to begin with here is I got to set the stage for this time management stuff that we're going to talk about. Okay. So as part of that, I'm setting the stage on this. I'm going to show you a couple of things that were discovered by a guy by the name of C. Northcott Parkinson. So what you're looking at here is the Parkinsons Law of Expansion is this first one. So we're going to talk about 2 of them. So, but first, let me kind of give you the background on who this guy was. C. Northcott Parkinson, it was in school working on his PhD, and part of his PhD thesis that he was working on was he was studying the ships in the Royal Navy in the port of Southampton. And as part of doing that, as part of his PhD thesis, he discovered a couple of principles, well, more than a couple, but I'm going to share with you 2 of the principles that he discovered in the process of that really, to some extent, this guy is the father of business consulting. So the C. Northcott Parkinson is the guy that kind of created business consulting. So now in the world today, you've got all these business consultants that companies will hire them to come in and look at what are we doing and how do we do it better and what does that look like? Well, to some extent, C. Northcott Parkinson was kind of the first guy that ever did that as working on his PhD thesis as he was studying the Royal Navy. Okay, so in studying them, what he found out is I'm going to share these 2 principles that he came up with. The first one is this, that work expands so as to fill the time available for its completion. And so what he found in studying the Royal Navy was, and this is actually, by the way, true, I've observed it in every company I have ever worked in since then. Come around. So I've observed this, sorry guys, in every company. That's okay. We were just waiting for you. We're ready to start.
All right. I told you you're coming.
Yeah. So I've observed this in every company that I have ever worked with. And if you will stop and think about it, I would guess you will notice this as well. Now, what does it have to do with you and how does it relate to you? I'll share that with you of how all this relates to you as well in terms of your real estate. But first, I want to go through the principle. So work expands so as to fill the time available for its completion. Basically, what he found was this. If you say to yourself, I am going to go to, if tonight you were to say to yourself, I'm going to go to the office tomorrow and I'm going to be there from 8 o'clock in the morning until 5 o'clock at night. I mean, whatever the time, doesn't matter what it is. But if you tell yourself, I am going to work tomorrow between these hours, what he found is that work will expand so as to fill the time available for its completion. And to some extent, I hate teaching this principle because it just reminds me how ineffective I am with the use of my time. Because what will happen is we go to work, and so we say, I'm going to show up at the office, and we will find things to do. The work will expand to fill the time available for its completion. Another way of thinking about it. If you were given a project, or go back to in school, you were told you had an assignment that you had to get done by a certain date. Work will expand so as to fill the time available for its completion. Think about how many times either you do this or you've seen other people do it, where you know, I've got until such and such date to get this project done. How often does it take place that at the last minute, people are hurrying to finish the project? See, I observe it even in meetings that we have here within the company. Take, for example, Summit. We know we're going to have Summit once a month. And what ends up happening, though, is that the last little bit before Summit starts, we're all running around trying to get everything organized and working. Work expands so as to fill the time available for its completion. Okay, so that's the first principle that we're going to talk about. Okay. Now, here's what this looks like, and here's how he found this. Sorry, my nose feels like it's ripping or something. So here's what he found. So in studying the Royal Navy, he noticed that in 1914, so all of this took place, he was doing this in 1930 is when this study that he did took place. But what he noticed is in 1914, the number of capital ships that the Royal Navy had in commission was 62. They had 146,000 officers and men in the Royal Navy. There were 57,000 dockyard workers, dockyard officials and clerks, 3,200, and then the Admiralty, the officials, basically the upper management, was at 2,000. Well, in 1928, he noticed the number of ships had gone down. Now, occasionally, as I've taught this, people will want to talk about, well, here's why the number of ships went down. And that doesn't matter. Like, meaning that's not the point of this, is why the ships decreased. That doesn't matter. But just notice, from 1914 to 1928, the number of ships decreased. And the point we're making doesn't have anything to do with that. It has to do with the next pieces of this, which is, notice what happened is the number of ships decreased by 67%. Okay. The officers and men only decreased by 30%. So you don't have as many ships operating. Therefore, you shouldn't need as many officers and men in the Royal Navy, yet it only decreased by half. Then notice what happened, though. The number of dockyard workers actually increased by 9%. The dockyard officials and clerks by 40%, and then the upper echelon, the upper management, increased by 78%. So why, the question I have for you guys is, why would the number of ships decrease? And I don't want to, I know why the number of ships decreased, but why would the number of upper management people increase as the number of ships decrease? Any thoughts?
You know, I have often wondered at why, because at other places where I work, the very same thing happens, and why?
Yeah. Well, here's why. Work expands so as to fill the time available for its completion. Here's what happens. If not carefully managed, what will happen is this. And I've observed this at every company that I've ever worked for. You go into a meeting and you sit down and you start talking about how do we get better? And somewhere along the way, somebody will say, well, you know what we ought to do is we ought to create this new program. Well, nobody in the meeting wants to take responsibility to oversee the program. So what they come up with is we should hire somebody else to come in and oversee this program. See, work expands so as to fill the time available for its completion. Now, meaning what we're saying here on this is not the same thing as tied to time, but it's around this idea of work expands. And we create things out of nothing just because we think it's going to do something, when in reality, it probably doesn't do a whole lot for it. So meaning what happened here is the Admiralty sits there and goes, well, we got to promote some guys, or we need to have this, or whatever, you know, we come up with these ideas. And what ends up happening is, if not properly managed, any company is going to become very top heavy in terms of management. And unless you would manage it. Well, here's how this applies to you in real estate though, is when you show up to do your work, if you're not careful, work will expand so as to fill the time available for its completion. You'll find busy work, things to do that make you feel like you're working that are not necessarily tied to productivity. Now, so let me mention it this way. And I know it's been a couple of weeks, but I shared with you guys the story about how I was doing 50 contacts every day. See, I would go home at night feeling like I worked really hard because I got my 50 contacts in for the day. But that is not the same thing as being productive, so I'm kind of getting ahead of myself a little bit. So, okay. So this is how he figured this out though. The way he came up with this principle of work expands to fill the time available for its completion is because he noticed as the number of ships went down, all of this side of the equation, that right side there, increased. And in studying it, what he found out is that work expands. We create work where it doesn't need to be made. Therefore, they got to hire more people to go do the work, which really isn't doing anything to their production. Okay. All right. So that's the first one. The second thing that he found is what he called the law of triviality. So the first one is the law of work expansion. This one is the law of triviality. And here's what he found on this is, so I'm going to talk to you in terms of an agenda of a meeting, but I'll show you how it applies to us as well. What he found is this: time spent on any item of the agenda will be an inverse proportion to its importance. So what does that mean? Time spent on any item of the agenda would be an inverse proportion to its importance. All right.
Is this in English?
Yeah, it is.
Obviously.
Yeah, the King's English. Yeah, exactly.
Is this kind of like a work smarter, not harder kind of thing, or we're not really getting it?
Yeah. Yes, we're headed that. That's where we're headed to. But what this is saying is, okay, so let me explain it to you this way. In fact, let me see. I've got one other thing. Actually, I'm going to bounce around, so I'll come back to it. So I'll come back to this. I'm going to skip these two and I'll come back to them in a minute. So for a minute, we're going to show this. So I'm going to give you an example of what this means. The time spent on any item of an agenda will be an inverse proportion to its importance. So I'm going to tell you a story about the Boston School District. The Boston School District was doing actually, let me back up. Every school district has a school board. Who are the people that make up school boards? Do you know? Like, where do the people who end up on a school board, the school district boards, who are they? And you guys on Zoom can help. You're being awfully quiet.
So the educators, the administrators.
Okay, so there are going to be some administrators and some educators, but there's more.
Parents.
Typically, it's parents. It's just people who are like, I want to get involved. I want to make sure things are happening better. And in fact, actually, if you remember last year, towards the end of the school year, or so I guess it was still this year, wasn't it, right? Yeah. The end of the school year, the Granite School District was having a meeting like this. The Granite School District was having a board meeting where a bunch of parents showed up and started this whole chaos over the mask issue. And all of the people sitting on the board basically just got up and walked out of the meeting. They were like, meeting's over. It's not going anywhere. So they just ended the meeting. Well, the ringleader of that actually used to be a neighbor of mine that was like, okay, well, if they left, we can nominate our own board members and blah, blah, blah. Anyway, my point of that is these were just parents that are involved in helping the school district to run. Well, so I'm going to share with you a story about the Boston School District, but it's important that you remember that typically the people who make up the board are teachers, they are parents. It's mostly just kind of people that aren't out running businesses necessarily. I mean, it could be, but okay. So the Boston School District had a meeting. On the agenda for their meeting, there were two items they were going to discuss, okay? The first item on the agenda was going to be talking about an annex, building a new building. And it was going to be somewhere around $1.5 million to build this building. Okay, so that was one of the items. In fact, I was thinking I need to reverse these because this is not the order they were in on the agenda. The second item was a $200,000 item. So really, this was the first item. The $200,000 item was the first item on the agenda. The 1.5 million was the second. So I don't know why I put them on the slideshow this way, but I really just need to update this whole slideshow, but because it's old. But come on in, Ruby.
Hi.
You don't have to join us, but you're welcome to join
Well,
us.
I think here's the replacement.
Oh, did they make it?
Not yet, but
Okay. So there's two items. The first item that they were going to discuss was a $200,000 item. And the difference between the high bid and the low bid of this $200,000 item was $20,000. Okay. The second item on the agenda was this $1.5 million building that they were going to be building. And the difference between the high bid and the low bid on it was 200,000. So let me just make sure you guys got it. The first item on the agenda, they were talking about spending $200,000 and they had a bid. The difference between the high and the low was like $10,000. Okay. The other item was a $1.5 million. The difference between the bid, the high and the low was $200,000 items. Okay. Now, they ended up spending, oops, got ahead of myself. They ended up spending 57.5 minutes. So now this meeting, this board meeting, the school board meeting was supposed to last an hour. They spent 57.5 minutes talking about this item here. The difference between the high bid and the low bid was 10,000, okay? They then spent 7.5 minutes, so the meeting went over, talking about this $1.5 million item, where the difference between the high bid and the low bid was $200,000. On the 1.5 million, they took the high bid, okay? On the $200,000 item that they were discussing, they ended up taking the low bid. So they saved $10,000. They spent 57.5 minutes talking about this item and they saved $10,000. They spent 7.5 minutes talking about this one and they took the high bid. Now, here's the question for you. That this is going to help you to see what we were talking about of time spent on items. Any item in an agenda will be spent in inverse proportion to its importance. What do you think they spent 57.5 minutes talking about that they saved $10,000 on? Just, and it's simple. So give me like simplest thing you could think of.
Talked about the people that did the bidding.
Okay.
The contractors or whatever.
Okay, but what was the item they were talking about?
Oh. How to save money.
Yeah, but specifically on what? There was one item that they spent 57.5 minutes arguing back and forth about as to if they should go with the high or the low bid on it. And it's a very simple item
Station.
for school. Close, but simpler.
We've done this at my work.
Yeah, well, so you get it. That's what happens.
It's not stationary, it's
There she is.
Ross, I'm so sorry.
It's all good. Oh, Samantha. Okay,
It's been so long.
I know. So what we're talking about real quick
Okay.
is a school district had two items of an agenda. The first item was a $200,000 item. The difference between the high bid and the low bid was $10,000. They spent 57.5 minutes talking about this item, and then they went with the low bid. 7.5 minutes on a $1.5 million building, they took the high bid and spent an extra 200,000. So what were they talking about for 57.5 minutes?
toilet paper.
That's exactly right. Toilet paper. They spent 57.5 minutes arguing about which brand of toilet paper they should use. And then took the low bid. Then they spent 7.5 minutes arguing over $200,000. Well, really, they weren't arguing over it because it spent 7.5 minutes. After 7.5 minutes, they just said, we'll go with the high bid. Now, here's the thing. How this relates to you and I, this is so crucial. If you understand why this happened, it will give you huge insight into how you can be better in your business or why we struggle in our business, okay? So why would they have spent 57.5 minutes arguing about toilet paper, only 7.5 minutes and just gone with the hybrid?
Maybe they had a bad dinner the night before, I don't know. That was their focus.
Were they out of time and they had to rush the second part of the agenda, or is it?
To some extent, yes, they had to rush it, but why? Yes, but the bigger question is, why did they spend 57.5 minutes on toilet paper and not spend it on the other thing?
I don't think this is it, but people tend to focus on what they more easily understand.
No, that's exactly what it is. So, yeah, say that again.
They focus on what they more easily understand.
That's right. It's so said another way,
That's so true.
we are all familiar with toilet paper. We all have an opinion about it. We all know what we like or dislike or whatever. But so in fact, actually, let me ask it this way. If you, by a raise of hands, if you have purchased toilet paper or someone in your household in the last year, raise your hand.
I hope
Okay.
everybody.
A Filipino, we use a tabo. You remember a tabo?
What?
It's the Filipinos. They use a tabo. It's like a pitcher of water next to the toilet.
Oh, yeah. So now let me ask you this question. If you spent of your own money, $1.5 million to purchase something in the last year, raise your hand. See, that's the insight to what Troy's talking about. We're all familiar with this. Now, here's the other thing. Stop and think about it. Who are the people who make up the school board?
No.
Typically, yeah, parents. So if we're going to talk about building a building for our kids, what would we want to do? We would want to make sure it's the safest building out there. Therefore, we don't know, this is what was going on unconsciously with them, with the parents. They don't know, they're not familiar with all the building codes and zoning things or whatever. They don't understand all that stuff. Therefore, we probably want the best for our kids. So we should just go with the high bid because we're probably getting a better product. That's what goes on. So now let me come back to this. Time spent on any item of agenda will be in inverse proportion to its importance. So tell me what that means. Now that I've shared that story, what does that mean?
What you spend time on is what's important to you. Wait, no.
It's, I mean, it's in
Yeah.
the phrasing of the name. It's the trivial tasks soak up all the time.
Yeah, that's right. The trivial tasks are going to take up all of the time because why?
We understand.
We understand them. We're familiar with it. So guess what, for you in real estate, the things that are going to take up the most amount of time for you are typically going to be the things you're most familiar with because we're familiar with it. We're comfortable. So now, okay, so I'll come back to that in just a second. Okay, so the next principle. So as we go through this and we talk about this activities management, and I'm going to help you in seeing how effective you're being in your real estate career, but I got to get these pieces in place first. This next one is what's called the Pareto Principle. This was discovered by a guy by the name of Vilfredo Pareto. You guys have all heard of it as the 80-20, but really the guy who discovered that was the guy by the name of Vilfredo Pareto. And what he found is this, is 80% of our time is spent on activities that make a 20% contribution to our business. We spend 20% of our time on the activities that make an 80% contribution to our business. So what happened is he started studying, he was an Italian economist. So he's like studying the economy in Italy. And what he found is that the production tended to come out of 20%, 80% of the production came out of 20% of the people. And 20% of the people, sorry, so yeah, 20% of the production came out of 80% of the people. 80% of the production came out of 20%, meaning that not very many people were really involved in doing it. Well, so how does that apply to you and I? This is what it basically looks like. If you had 10 activities that you were going to do during a day, these first two will be the ones that would contribute the most to your business. And this red line is the amount of time you would spend on it. So you spend the least amount of time on the two most important things. And we spend this amount of time, the most amount of time on the least important things. See, so what's going to tend to happen, and the reason for that then goes back to this, of the things that we're familiar with is where we're going to spend our time, because we're familiar with it. Meaning, were any of you guys stressed or worried about coming to class today? Were you like, oh man, like I'm so nervous about going to class? No. Yet, if right now, Jeremy, I said to you, come up in front of the whole class and call it for sale by owner right now,
I'd be scared.
you'd be a little nervous about it, right?
Probably pee myself.
We got to.
I figured.
So notice that is, see, nobody has a problem. What's going to happen basically with us is if we don't manage it, we will spend the most of our time, like, actually, let me go back to this. If we don't manage it properly, we'll spend the most amount of our time on the least important things. Meaning, it is not uncommon for somebody to say, well, before I start prospecting and calling people, I need to make sure that I understand how to fill out a contract. And I need to make sure that I did it. And all that is that's going on is this law of triviality of saying, basically, I need to spend some time working on the least important things before I start doing the most important things, because I'm not comfortable. So at the end of the day, that's what it looks like. Okay, now, so with that, let me turn all this off. Screen up.
I think you're answering my question.
Okay, what's your question?
Pretty much that. Right now, being new, I'm having a hard time what to focus.
I get it.
You know, so
We're gonna do that, right? Okay, now, so what happens is something like this. So this is the next piece of this, and then we're gonna get into how do you use all this now in your real estate career. So erase this, make it a great day. So make it a great day, and then we're gonna erase it. Did Ruby do that? Did she
It
do
was
one?
there already.
Oh, it was? I was wondering if she did morning ascent or something. Okay, here's what this looks like. So think of it this way. What we're going to talk about is, and in fact, the last time I taught this class, somebody gave me the idea. I used to call it one thing. I'm going to call it something else now. I'm going to call it, well, no, I'll come back to it. Think of it this way. If this line here represents time, okay? This line here represents the amount of money that you're going to make, okay? What we're going to do is I'm going to give you a process for you to keep track of what you are doing in terms of real estate, where you're spending your time, to know how effective you are being with it. Because here's why. So here's the point. If you don't carefully manage this within your real estate career, the two principles we just talked about, the work expansion, work will expand so as to fill the time available for its completion. Meaning, if you don't manage it, you will come and spend time at the office, but your time spent here at the office, time spent on work is not directly related towards productivity. So I kind of feel like, is this making sense? Okay, good. Because I kind of feel like I'm bouncing all over, but I want to make sure that you guys are getting it, because just because you come and show up at the office doesn't mean you're productive. That's basically what I'm saying, okay? And so I'm going to give you a way for you to keep track of it, for you at the end of every day to be able to look at it and evaluate and say, how productive was my day? Because time spent on work is not the same as being productive at work, okay? Now, what happens though is, so think of this line as being time. This one is the amount of money that you're going to make. But I'm going to call these things a little different things, because anything you do on this axis of this represents time, but it also represents productivity. Okay. anytime you're spending time on this part of the axis, this represents money, but it also represents non-productivity. Okay, meaning that anytime that I get stuck right here, I'm not being productive because this is where the productivity happens. So anything right here is non-productive. Now, we're not going to get into this side of it, but this side over here would be counterproductive, meaning you're doing counter to what you're trying to accomplish. So think of it as that. Okay. Now, as we go through and talk about this, if it were possible, and I shouldn't say it's not possible, but if it were possible to spend 100% of your time on this productivity line and just constantly right there, you would make a ton of money. But you're going to have to do something else that's going to bring a line like this and then down back like this that I would call indirectly productive. Okay, so that line, so I know this is a little confusing possibly right now as I'm going through this, but it's going to make sense as I go through it. Meaning that, in fact, I probably should use a different color to demonstrate some of this. So let's have the time and the money be represented by this green marker. What's going to happen is something like this in terms of your income. It's not very dark. I don't know if I'm better at color. So purple will be these, okay? It's going to look something like this, meaning that this is not linear, meaning that if you were to keep track of your time, and I'll show you what that looks like in a second here. If you became twice as productive, so here's how I guess I'll say it to you. And if I'm losing you guys, stop me, okay? But if you, following what I'm going to show you today, if you become twice as productive, it doesn't mean you're going to double your income by being twice as productive. If you doubled your productivity, so meaning that it's not linear, it doesn't work like this line, it works like this. If you went, let's just hypothetically say this right here line was 5% productive, and then over here is 10% productive. Going from here to here isn't going to just double your income, it's going to probably 4 or 5 times. So does that make sense what I'm saying?
Yeah, it's an exponential relationship.
That's right. Good, perfect. Yeah. So it's not linear. Okay. So what I'm saying, so let me even say it this way to you. Most of you guys, in fact, let me see who's online. Yeah, I would say probably every one of you guys, including the people on Zoom, are probably well, actually, let me ask it this way. Let me do it this way. What percentage of your time would you guys guess are you productive in terms of real estate? And so not life in general, but just when you're working in real estate, what percentage of your time would you say you're spending it productively?
3.
3, okay. I like that, Brielle, thank you. 5%? I know, did I influence you by putting 5% there? 1%?
5%, really?
Well, what do you think?
I was gonna say if.
Marianne, you really think that 5% of your time is productive? I'm watching this guy like.
I'm thinking
work
probably
his ass
less.
off every day.
Okay, but remember, time spent at work is not the same thing as being productive at work.
But so what does productivity mean? then?
That's where we're going.
I feel like I can't tell you the percentage. if I
Well,
don't know.
but forget everything else. If just before class today, I would have said to you, how productive do you think you are with your time, Sam? What would you say?
70%.
70%. Okay, good. So
Tell
we'll
you,
find.
my wife thinks about 1%.
She- See, and mine's probably the opposite. My wife probably thinks that I'm a lot more productive than I really am.
I did call night with her last night. It was brutal.
Was it? Okay. So yeah, I'm going to show you what that looks like, because I'm going to give for you a formula, and formula might sound too technical, but I'm going to give you a way for you to know how productive you are with your time. Okay. And I'll show you what that looks like. But here's what I have found. So you're not going to like this, Sam, but
I'm gonna be like, what?
Yeah.
He's gonna tell me in the face.
Yeah.
That's okay.
so what I have found is most agents that are good agents. Now, I'm not talking about the top producing agents, but I'm saying agents that probably sell 15, 20 houses a year are probably only 10% productive with their time.
Damn it.
So
So you're saying I'm stressing out too much and we're being productive all the time?
no, well, no, actually, I don't think you are no, I would almost say we're not managing it enough is the problem.
Ooh.
So, and I'll show you what I mean here in just one second. So, but before we do that, so the next step that I want to do with this is I want to walk you guys through, let's talk about just some things that go on in real estate. And when I say this, I want like real, like I'm going to give to you guys here in a little bit, this daily work tracker. And on the side of this, and I don't know if you can see it, but right up here at the top, what it says is power comes out of telling the truth. I just am a believer that power comes out of telling the truth. So I want to have you guys give me some activities that we do in real estate, and I want real activities. And what I mean is don't give me the answers you think that I want. Like, stop and think about what are some of the things that you do during a day, and I'm going to list them on the board. And again, I'm not looking for the right answer. I want actually the truth of like, what are some things, if you stop and think about your day in terms of real estate. So like, I don't care about outside of that, but what are the things that, the activities that you do in real estate? So like, for example, coming to a class would be, so taking a class would be something that we would do in real estate. So I'll
Look
write,
at the hot sheet.
say that again.
I look at the hot sheet.
Okay, so looking at hot sheets. Okay, good.
What's the hot sheet?
So you can set up on the MLS. If you save a search for somebody on the MLS so that it'll send them properties that match the criteria
Okay.
they're looking for, that's what's called a hot sheet.
Okay.
You can do that?
Yeah.
I've just been going through every day and
Oh, yeah,
them
no.
to send them to him.
Yeah, no, you want to set up hot sheets. Although I don't know if they call it that on the MLS anymore. So
Okay.
depending on, so if you're using a pro agent website, it's hot sheets. On our MLS, it might be now called listing alert or something like that.
Okay,
anyway.
I've seen that.
Okay,
Well,
Good.
on our MLS, the hot sheet is just everything that's new on the market in the last 24 hours.
yeah, so that's typically what, yeah. And are you talking about from Flex MLS?
Yes.
Yeah, yeah, and I think on the Wasatch Front, the MLS that we use up here, I think they changed the name. I can't remember if it's still called hot sheet, might be listing alerts
Listing
now.
alerts? Okay,
Anyway, yep, okay,
good to know, thank you.
okay, good. What else? What are some other activities? And
Do we want to just say prospecting or break that down into?
no, prospecting is good enough for me. Well, we will break it down a little. Oops, I'm talking while I'm writing, but I will break it down, but we don't need to right now.
Right now, being new, that's where I don't know where to focus. I'm trying to figure out the dot loop and other stuff.
Yes, like education on the websites, on.
Okay, so I'm just gonna put learning stuff. How's that? So it's not necessarily the classes side of things,
Right.
but it's like I gotta learn how to get on the MLS. I gotta learn how to do a hot sheet. I gotta learn how to do.
Do a search, how to-
Yeah, okay, good. What else?
Talking to other agents.
Okay, good.
I'd say social media has a part in it.
Email.
Okay, good.
Sure.
Email. What?
Social media.
Yeah, social media.
Breakfast.
Okay, that's why I said real estate. But to some extent, if it's like, hey, grabbing another agent and going and getting breakfast, I'm just gonna call it lunch. How's that?
Yeah.
That includes,
That's an important part of the day.
I
And then
agree.
You go out with other people, that's a part of prospecting. Yeah.
Okay,
I mean, I was gonna say most of my stuff is like training videos and that stuff, where it seems like it's more like that busy work instead of actually being productive. It's like the non-productive
Okay,
stuff.
I'm just gonna put busy work. How's that? Okay. Okay, so here, part of what's going on here is because I'm dealing with mostly new agents here, this is what's going on. So, okay, so I'm gonna, now let me introduce you to this other thing that we're gonna, an acronym.
Dealing with
That-
clients as well.
What?
Sorry. I just-
No, good, that's perfect. That's what I wanted to hear. So say it.
Just dealing with clients.
So
like,
when you say dealing with clients, tell me what that means.
updating them on what's going on, doing the like administrative work for them.
Oh. Okay, back over here. You have me so excited for a minute.
I'm so sorry.
I'm just kidding, admin work.
And then going like showing them. how
Okay,
to
good.
save
Now
money.
that's where I wanted. Okay. Showing
Everything having to do with your clients.
properties. Right? Like what other things do to do? Like besides showing properties, what other kinds of things?
Talking to them, like your presentations.
Okay, good. There we go.
Helping them
Presenting.
get a loan,
What?
helping them get a loan, helping them,
Talking to the lender.
Talking to the lender.
Okay. That one's going over here.
You seem really disappointed.
I know.
Making money side isn't the making money side.
That's, yeah, that's exactly what it is. So, yeah, okay.
So what I'm learning right now is I'm doing a lot of non-productive stuff.
So you, yeah, good. So you just hit on it. This right here is what we're gonna call non-productive.
But non-productive still makes money.
So yeah, so let me classify, which I was just gonna say. Do not hear non-productive as not important.
So don't go cut my wrist.
Yeah, don't go cut your wrist.
I qualified as inefficient.
So hear it as non-productive, but it's not, don't hear non-productive as not important. These things are still gonna be important things we have to do. And just stick with me, like, yeah, don't get depressed yet. Because you're gonna see that I'm gonna allow for you and tell you that it's okay to have 40% of your time spent doing these things. That's okay. Okay, so it's not that these things are not important, they're just non-productive, meaning that's that law of triviality that we just talked about. Time spent on any item of an agenda, or let's just say time spent at work, will be an inverse proportion to its importance. We'll spend more time doing these things, and how much are they going to contribute to our business? A very little amount. Go ahead.
But isn't administration work like putting in offers and doing contracts and things like that? Isn't that productive?
So if you're saying writing an offer, I would put that over here.
Okay.
But once the offer is written, everything that else goes on with it is non-productive.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense.
Okay.
So that's why you would want to hire somebody else to help you do the admin work.
Good. Yeah, that's where we're headed to. That's where we're headed to. Yep.
Hmm.
Okay. So now, so I'm giving, I started to write up here this acronym of PINT, P-I-N-T, okay? So what I'm gonna do is give you a definition now for each one of these pieces, okay? Which I've already given you. The N here represents non-productive items, okay? The P on it is gonna be this, which is productive. So there's a couple of other things that I'm going to add to this list. So I'm going to put price reductions here. Negotiating. Let's see, what else would I put up there? Yeah, that's probably, I feel like I'm missing one, but maybe not.
Following up, fall under prospecting, same umbrella.
Yes,
Would like open houses be prospecting as well?
yes.
Okay.
Although I'll give you a definition on that in a second too. In fact, I'm gonna write that. I'm gonna just put OH here so I don't forget.
Okay.
Okay, let me just make sure that under productive. Oh, I know what it was. Yep, I was like, I know we're missing one.
If you're gonna erase it, let me know, or else I can take a picture of it before you do.
Oh, close.
Okay, yeah. I probably won't erase it, so. Okay. Now, I want you to take a look at this list. And what I want you to tell me is what do the items in this list have in common?
Those are list items that lead to yourself check.
They're
Okay.
action items.
So good, but give me a little more, even more detail on what you mean by that, because you're right on. But
That's basically a linear list of cell process that you check.
okay, good. So here's how I like to think of it. If I'm out showing property to a client, am I most likely with them? If I'm presenting to a client, whether it's a listing presentation or a buyer presentation, am I with them? If I'm writing an offer, now to some extent, dot loop and some of that's, we do it more, we leave them and go to the office and do it. But at least for most of my real estate career, if I was writing an offer, the client was sitting there while I was doing it. Okay. Price reduction. I'm probably, and again, because of dot loop and stuff, we're not necessarily in front of them as much as we used to, but we were in front of them. If I'm negotiating, I'm with the client. Closing, the client's there. So notice these productive items, basically what they have in common is ultimately, which tell me your first name?
Jason.
Jason? Okay, so what Jason said is right on. Essentially think of it as you're face-to-face in a selling situation. Or this is the other way I like to think of it. This is really the best way I think of it. What if I go out and I show properties to a buyer? Now, which I will classify this one, I usually say that if you're showing properties and they have not signed a buyer broker, I would move them over into this prospecting category. So that's the one caveat I would say is if you're showing properties to somebody who has signed a buyer broker agreement, I count them as productive. If they have not signed a buyer broker, you're still prospecting. And that can be a whole separate discussion, but what do I want to have happen if I go out and show properties? What am I hoping at the end of that meeting? What am I hoping to have happen?
To write an offer.
Okay, good. If I go to present, whether it's to a buyer or a seller, what do I want to have happen at the end of that?
Writing an offer or signing.
Yeah, sign a contract.
contracts.
If I write an offer, what I'm obviously hoping that they're going to sign it, right?
Mhm.
If I'm trying to get a price reduction from a seller, what am I wanting to have happen at the end of that meeting?
Them sign it.
Them sign something. If I'm negotiating an offer, what do I want to have happen?
Sign.
At closing, what do we want them to do?
Sign.
So notice what all of those things have in common is we're getting somebody to sign something. Your most productive thing you can do as an agent is this. Now, fortunately or unfortunately, depending on how you want to look at it, does these things like, how you've had your license how long, Mariana?
2 months.
How many?
Two.
Two? How long,
Month or, yeah. about a month.
how long about you, Jason? Okay,
1 month.
1 month.
A month.
What about you guys online?
We're all on the
Abby,
same level.
this is where I'm testing to see if you're listening, Abby. Because I asked you questions before and you didn't answer me.
She ran to grab a coffee.
Yeah, exactly.
She's cool.
She's taking a nap.
Man, she's letting me down again. All right, Brielle, how about you?
Say it again. I couldn't hear you.
How long have you had your license?
A year.
Okay, Caitlin, how about you?
I've had it for about a year too.
Okay, good. So you guys, so I'm gonna ask Brielle, you and Caitlin. So in the year that you've had your license, and for you guys that have, for the last few months, and I'm trying to think of how to ask this because I don't want this to come across like I'm asking a negative question in any way. But did anybody just like, once you got your license, has anybody just like out of the blue just called you and said, come list my house? Or
Nope.
come write an offer for me?
No, but I got called
No.
about health insurance right after I got my license.
Yeah, no, but yeah, exactly. Yeah, and you'll continue to get that. So here's my point in that. Notice that the most productive thing we can do with our time is this, but it also doesn't just happen. Like, meaning the public thinks, which by the way, for you guys, in case you didn't know this, The public thinks that when you got your license and you came to work here, that we're just giving you business, FYI. Like your friends and family think that's how it works. They don't know you need their help, which is totally sidebar from what we're talking about right here. You got to make sure they know that you need their help in getting referrals from them. Otherwise, they assume that you just don't work that way. So this stuff doesn't just happen. So what leads to this thing?
Middle column.
The middle column, which is what we're going to call indirectly productive. Okay, so now let me see if I can start to tie some of this together for you. Remember this line here is productivity. That any time spent going this direction on this line is productive. Okay. But unfortunately, what I just told to you guys, we can't just do this in like, could you imagine, by the way, like this piece of it always is interesting to me to stop and think about. Could you imagine if when you showed up and got your license, if I just said, hey, Sam, so tomorrow you're going to spend 8 hours doing all of this stuff. Like, or even, let's make it even better. Okay, Sam, tomorrow you're going to spend 8 hours. You're going to go to 8 different closings tomorrow and you're getting paid the commission on every one of them.
Well, okay,
And then, and for the rest of
I'll be there.
every day, 5 days a week, Monday through Friday, for 8 hours, you're just going to go sit in on closings and you're getting paid the commission on every one of those.
That would be great.
How much money would you make if that happened?
Well, right now, I don't have any closings.
No,
Oh.
but assuming if
Oh.
I
I would be a millionaire.
yeah,
More than that.
probably more than $1 million.
More than that. I'd be like,
Probably
yeah.
10.
yeah,
over
like
years, right.
millionaire, I mean like,
You'd
Like
make a ton of money,
tons.
right? If so, notice that. That's what I'm talking about when I'm saying, imagine if the time spent here was doing, if you spent 8 hours every day doing this stuff, like you would make a ton of money, right? But unfortunately, that's where I was saying on this, we can't get here. We have to kind of go indirectly there. Does that make sense? So let me actually show you what that looks like real quick.
but we need non-productivity to get to the indirect productivity.
Yeah, hold that
Right.
thought for 1 minute. Okay, so let me just do this real quick, and I apologize, you're not gonna be able to, it's probably, for you guys on Zoom, you're not gonna probably see it as well as, but let me show you my art skills here. What is that?
It's a sailboat.
Okay, good, so sailboat. Now, did any of you guys ever sailed? You're from Ventura, right?
I'm from Big Bear.
Oh, you are? Okay.
Yeah, we grew up on boats, but not sailing.
Okay, anybody sail?
I wish.
Okay, anybody know anything about sailing? All right, and I'm not necessarily either, but I know this.
Flag up and take you by the wind.
Okay, good. So you put the sail up and it's gonna take you by the wind. So here's my question for you then, Mariano. If I'm sitting at point A in my sailboat and I want to go to point B and the wind is blowing like this, can I get there?
I'm sure if I knew how to sail, yes.
Okay. And the answer is yes, but what I'm gonna have to do is something that looks like this. I'm gonna have to go this way. Now, if somebody that doesn't know anything about sailing were to see somebody and say, hey, I'm gonna go from here to here, but the wind's blowing this way, and they start out this way. What is gonna be the thought of the person who doesn't know anything about sailing when they start heading out that direction?
Going the wrong way.
Yeah, you're going the wrong way. You're not getting there. Then they're gonna turn though, and they're gonna sail back this way. Then they're gonna turn and sail back this way, and then boom. Okay, so the term for that in sailing is called tacking. Okay, so you can do it, but you have to do it via tacking. So you can get from point A to point B. Now, here's the interesting thing. What if the wind wasn't blowing? Without a motor or an oar, you're left to drift wherever the water would take you, right? So notice though, part of what I want you to see from this is sometimes we look at it and see that the winds that seem like they're there to keep us from getting what we want are actually the things that we are going to use to get there. We just have to harness them and use them to our benefit, which is what they did here, okay? All right, so now back to this. In essence, what I'm talking about, this indirectly productive is this. is it's gonna feel like you're off track, more so to your significant other, because here's what happens. Now, and tell me if you guys have experienced this yet, where you go home and your significant other says, did you sell a house today? Have you heard that yet? No?
From my daughter, yes.
I've heard okay, what, did you get anything under contract?
Okay, good. Same thing. Yep. Did you get
Yeah.
anything under?
Yeah.
In essence, what is happening? And then your response to that is going to be, so when they say that, how do you answer?
I said no. I said no. I mean, I knew like I'm not there yet.
But I made some
I
good
will.
contacts.
I mean, yeah, I did this and
Say,
I did
okay,
this and
now
I
look.
did this. And then I was like, you asked me, that makes me feel like I was unproductive.
Exactly.
That's actually what I said.
Right, which is another way of this, is what they're saying is, did you get a house under contract? Because what they're saying is this. But what you have to keep in mind is, I'm gonna keep doing this, and they're gonna keep saying at each of these spots, did you get a house under contract? And you're saying, well, no, but I got some good leads and I'm following up on them, and it keeps happening, but notice it just slowly is taking you there. That's what this indirectly productive. We're gonna have to spend time on this indirectly productive line to then get to, this is again productive, okay? So just keep in mind, what's gonna have to happen is this. The way you get to the productive stuff is through indirectly productive things, okay? Now, and then what Sam said as well is, we do have to do some of these other non-productive things as well. Those are going to contribute. Meaning, could you imagine if you didn't have anybody to train you? Well, actually, Mariana, you started at a different company.
Right.
How much training did you get?
And that's what happened, like, nothing. So I was just going to the office and just like, okay, what do I do?
Oh, yeah, I had a guy. So when I first started, the office that I was in was on Redwood Road and about 7800 South. And there was big glass windows, just bigger than even what we have here, tall, I mean, wider, you know, and taller. And we were on the ground floor, and there was a guy that would come to my office, and he would sit down at his desk, and he would turn to where he could look out onto Redwood Road, and he would sit there like this for hours. And I was always trying to figure out, like, what is he doing? Like, but it's what you said. Unfortunately, we kind of don't. So what I'm saying is, this stuff is important. We got to do it. And I like, so yeah, don't get up and leave the class because I'm saying it's non-productive, but just notice though, we have to do this. Okay, so with that in mind, here's where I want to go with this now for you guys. Here's what I want to show you is, in fact, let me. No, I'm not gonna give it to you. Hang on. All right. Basically, what I'm saying is this. Part of what you want to do to be able to figure out how productive am I being with my time. So here's what I don't want you to do, Sam, is to leave here worried and feeling like, well, I don't have any of this stuff going on, therefore my day wasn't productive, okay? Here's what's important. The most important thing for you guys to look at, and whether you do this on a daily basis, a weekly basis, well, you have to do it on a daily basis, but don't judge it on a daily basis. What you should do though is judge it more so on a month rather than even a weekly basis. But after a week, we'll start to tell the picture, okay? So what you want to do is, we need to keep track of our time. So I'm going to give you this daily work tracker. And for you guys that are on Zoom, I will upload it into, are you guys all on computers? Are any of you on an iPad or a phone?
I'm on my phone.
You're on your phone. Okay, so you probably won't be able to get this. So Brielle, if you'll send me an email and remind me, I will email you this daily work tracker. Because I
Okay.
think on your phone, when I put it in the chat box, I don't think it'll show up.
Okay.
So anyway, okay. So but same Caitlin for you, and Abby, if you really are there, if you will send me an email, I'll shoot you the thing. Okay.
Okay, thanks, Rob.
Yep. So what you want to do is this though. So ultimately, let me give it to you right now. In fact, if you guys want, I'll just give you a couple, right? I got enough for everybody to have two. Okay. And then let me see quickly here. Wasn't thinking very good. Give me 1 second and I will pull it up on.
So what does the T stand for?
Yeah, I'll show you in 1 second. All right, I'm gonna pull this up so you guys at least on Zoom can see it. So give me 1 minute here. All right, so now you guys can see it on Zoom as well. Okay. What you want to do then with this is, you'll notice on there, I've got it to where it starts, what time does that start?
7:30.
Yeah, 7:30 and goes till what time at night?
9.
Okay, so only use this for real estate. Like you don't need to track like when you're at home and I'm watching TV or whatever, like don't track that. Just only track it when you think you're working. Meaning, if you think it's real estate related, even if it's under this stuff, this non-productive, keep track of it. But if you go home and you're having dinner and you go golfing or something, don't count that time, okay? But what you want to do is and where I learned this actually was I had a guy that was trying to help me learn how to be more effective with my time. And so what he had told me is, he said, I want you to keep track throughout the day of all of your activities that you do. Thus the name of this class, Activities Management. And he said, what you're going to do is every 15 minutes. Now, back when I did this, there weren't Apple Watches. There weren't smart watches available to use. But I had an Ironman, the Timex Ironman triathlete watch, and it had a timer on there that you could set it to beep every 15 minutes. So lucky for today, either your phone or your watch, you can set a timer and have it go off and just go every 15 minutes. So what I did though was with my Ironman triathlete watch is I set it up, and as soon as I would walk into the office at work, I would hit the button to start that timer counting down. And then every time it would beep, I pulled out this piece of paper and I would write down what I had done since the last time it beeped. So for instance, when I first walked in the office, I would start it. And then that first time it would beep, I would go, okay, what did I do? What of that 15 minutes, what did I do during that time? Now, I used to always worry as I would train this to agents of asking you to do it at 15 minutes. But then I was talking to Sam Bell, who is the president of the Everest organization. He is an attorney. And one of the things he told me one day is that the way attorneys do their billable hours is they have to do it every 6 minutes. So be grateful I'm not making you do it every 6 minutes. But so every 15 minutes, I would stop and write down what I did. And so you have to look at like the majority of that 15-minute time, what were you doing during that 15 minutes? Okay, so meaning if you made one phone call that took 1 minute and then you spent 14 minutes chit-chatting, Troy and I, like you should write down that you were spent 14 minutes talking to Troy, not prospect. Does that make sense? So like that's why I put on there, power comes out of telling the truth. If you lie on this, you're hurting yourself. So power comes out of telling the truth. Put down the truth of what you did. So what you want to do though, is when you write down after that 15 minutes what you did, then think about this list and say, which group does it fall under? Productive, indirectly productive, or non-productive? And then put that letter off to the side of whatever it is you've written. So what I would do is I'd walk in the office, I'd start the timer, I went and I started prepping for my phone calls. Because for me, the reason that started at 7:30 is that's what time I always showed up at the office. So at 7:30, I started to prep for my phone calls. So I was back, because again, back then, we didn't have a service that just gave us for sale by owners. So on my way to the office, I would stop at either the 7-Eleven or whatever convenience store. And I would buy the newspaper so that I could grab and go through and find all the for sale by owners in the newspaper. So for me, from 7:30 to 8 was spent prepping for my prospecting. Which category would that fall under? Prepping for prospecting.
Non-productive.
That's right, non-productive. So I would write down, when my timer would go off at 7:45, I'd put prep, and then I'd put N. Then 15 minutes later, I was still, because I'd pull the expireds and I was getting phone numbers and all that for a half an hour. So during that half an hour, both of those 15-minute segments would have an N next to them. But then at 8 o'clock, I would jump on the phone and start making phone calls. So I'm calling the for sale by owners, I'm calling the expireds. So after at 8:15, I would write down prospecting FISBOs or expireds or whatever. Then what would I write down? What letter would I put after? An I, exactly, okay? And I would keep doing that while I was prospecting. Well, where this thing really hit home to me was there was one day in particular that I got to the office, I went in and I had put down my 2 N's for non-productive, those first half an hour. Then I started to prospect and I knew at about 9 o'clock that the title company, my escrow officer at the title company would be there at the office. And I had gotten a new listing and I needed to go order the preliminary title report. So this happened to be a Monday. And so I put my phone down. I walked out of my office and then I walked down a hallway to a door that had the title company and our office were connected through this door. And I walked through the door and I went in and my buddy, the escrow officer, his name was Jeff, was sitting there. And I said, hey, Jeff, I got a new listing. And he's like, oh, awesome. Give me the information on it. So I gave him the address, the owner's name, and I was saying, hey, I want you to order the preliminary title report. So he does. And then I said to him, hey, so now Jeff my oldest son and his oldest son are born within like 2 or 3 months of each other. And so his son's name was Dallin. And I said, hey, Jeff, so how'd Dallin's games go this weekend? And I don't remember what specific sport we were talking about, but I just remember I said, how did his games go? And so he started telling me about his games. And then he said, how did Douglas's games go? My oldest son. How did Douglas's game? Oh, yeah, we and we sat and we talked about it. And, what else did you do this weekend? And blah, 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 blah. And this whole time, remember, my watch is on here and it would beep every 15 minutes. Well, we sat there and talked and I would reset and we talked and finally I was like, all right, well, I probably better get back over and make my phone call. So I get up and I walk back to my office and I still remember, like I can still see it in my mind's eye, exactly where I was at walking down that hallway when it beeped. And I went like this and I hit reset. And then like 5 steps later, I was to my office. So I turned into my office and I had that paper sitting on my desk. And so now I've got to go write down what I've done. Well, I didn't have to worry about every 15 minutes of what I had done because the whole time was over with Jeff. So I have this blank in there that I've got to fill in. Well, I look down to see what time it is. And let's just say it was 11:15 since that's about what time it is now. And I realize, holy cow, I just spent 2 hours over talking to Jeff. It had been 2 hours of me sitting there with my watch beeping and resetting, beep, reset, beep. But I didn't notice it until I didn't realize how much time. So here's what I mean by that. If at the end of the day, I had not been keeping track of that time and you had come up to me and said, hey, how much time did you spend talking to Jeff? I bet I would have told you I was probably 45 minutes over there, but it was 2 hours that we were just doing nothing. So I had to write down on my list, ordered preliminary title report and talked with Jeff, okay? Which category did I have to mark that as? Non-productive. So I had to put an N. It hurt. Like when I wrote that down, I was like, oh my gosh, look at how much time I just spent doing non-productive stuff. And like, I wouldn't have said it was counterproductive, but it wasn't even like I guess to me, there's important but non-productive, and then there's not important non-productive. That was not important, non-productive stuff to have done. Meaning he's a good friend, still is today, but really, do I want to spend 2 hours of my workday doing that, which that's why I said to Sam earlier, of my wife probably thinks that I'm 70% productive when I'm not, because I guarantee you, if my wife knew that day, like, hey, you're gone to work and you spent 2 hours talking to Jeff, not counting then going to lunch probably with Jeff later on and spending another at least hour with him. Like, I honestly, my wife would have been like, seriously, this is what you do at work all day? Like, no wonder we don't have any money. Yeah. So that's the idea of this, is if you do that. Now, then at the end of the day, what you want to do is at the end of the day, so now this is where the T comes into play. The T is total time. So the T is your total hours worked, basically. So the T is total. So at the end of the day, what you're going to do is down there at the bottom, you've got the T equals. You're going to put, if you showed up at 7:30 and you left at whatever time, how many total hours were you at work? Okay, so you're going to put the total right there. Then you'll notice the other two that it's got is I and P. Notice that we don't do anything with the N. And the reason that I don't worry about the N is because it really doesn't matter that much and it takes care of itself. So at the end of the day, you want to write down how many hours did you spend doing indirectly productive, which indirectly productive is prospecting. Oh, which I still need to, I'm assuming Sam was coming back. When she walks in, somebody remind me to talk about the open house. She's the one who brought it up. So and if she doesn't come back before we're done, remind me and I'll tell you guys what I want to say about it anyway. But at the end of the day, I want to write down how many hours total did I spend doing indirectly productive things. And then also I'm going to, at the end of the day, put down how many hours were spent doing these items up here, the productive things. Okay. Now, let me actually speak to, when I would walk into a client's house, I didn't have my watch still beep. Like I would stop it. Because what I didn't want to do is be sitting in a presentation with them or out showing property or whatever and having it beeping every 15 minutes. So I would stop it then, but I always knew what time the appointment started. And then when it ended, I would immediately start the timer again. So I knew when it, so I could then at the end of the appointment write down, okay, I just spent an hour with that client on a presentation or whatever, and I would put it down and then I could put your total. Okay. Now, each day, you don't need to really do anything beyond that. So each day, you're just going to do total hours worked, how many hours were I time, how many hours were P time, and that's it. At the end of the week, then, and you can decide what that means. If it is the end of the week, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, whatever you decide. But figure out at the end of the week, then I want to take all of the sheets that I've filled out for each of the days that I worked, and I want to add together all of the T. So at the end of the week, I'm going to total together all the total time. So that now I'm going to know for the week I worked this many hours. Now, you will notice that I have said nothing about total number of hours worked until just right now. Notice that was like the last thing. And the reason is there is no correlation between hours worked and productivity. Okay, so like just know you can be very productive in a short amount of time and make a lot of money in a short amount of time. So meaning you don't have to go out and spend more hours working. You just have to be more effective with the hours you are working. Okay. But at the end of the week, you're going to total it up. And the only reason I'm having you total it up is because of this. You're then going to also total up the number of hours that were indirectly productive and the total number of hours that were productive. Okay. And then what you're going to do is divide the P time into the T time. So you want the productive time into the total time to get a percentage. And then you're going to write down what the percentage is. So let's just say that based on what I told you guys before, typically most productive agents are about 10% here. Okay. Then you're going to do the same thing for your productive time. And let's just say that it ended up being, I don't know, I'm going to do 20%. It doesn't really matter. Therefore, if that's the case, if I spent 20% of the time indirectly productive and 10% productive, how much did I do non-productive then? See, that's why you don't need to total up, keep track of and add up all your non-productive. 2 reasons I don't want you to do it. Number one, it's not necessary because that just means it's what was left over. The other thing is it can be very depressing at the end of every day to be like, wow, that wasn't very good. But here's the key thing. So here's what I want you to notice. At the end of every week, what I want you to do then is add these two together. So in this case, we're going to see that it was at 30%. Okay. So what that means is that's what I'm worried about, is those two added together. Don't worry about track it this way, but to begin with, the most important thing, actually even not to begin with, I don't care who you are, where you are. Let me actually tell you a quick story about, I have a guy that I trained in this, and he was early on in the process of me starting to train this. So he's been using this system that I'm talking to you about for 15 years now, probably maybe even 16 years now. I went to lunch with him about a year ago, and his name's Craig. And I said, hey, Craig, are you still using this? I called it a tip analysis because you'll notice that's what we have is TIP is typically what I refer to it as, even though the acronym here is PINT. I said, are you still using the tip analysis? And he said, anytime that I feel like my business is off track, I immediately jump into this tip analysis because I know it'll tell me the story. So that's what I want you guys to know from this. Getting started in real estate as a new agent, this is crucial that you do this because actually it doesn't even matter that you're new. Just remember that over time, everything gets off track. Over time, there's a term in science called entropy. Entropy says that over time, everything is breaking down. Meaning, if I built a building, so since we were talking about schools, if I build a building out in the West Desert and we didn't do anything with it, we build it and nobody ever went there again, what would it look like in 10,000 years? Probably not even 10,000, maybe 1,000 years from now. What would it be? Yeah, probably a pile of dust.
Deteriorated for sure.
That's entropy. Over time, everything is wearing down, getting off track, okay? So if you don't manage it, your business will automatically do this. So when I went to lunch with Craig and I said, do you still use the tip analysis? He said, 100%. Anytime I feel like I'm in a slump. So if you ever in real estate feel like you're in a slump or for getting your business started, you got to do this because it'll immediately show you what the problem is. See, for me, if you came to me and said, Russ, I want you to coach me, the first thing I'm going to tell you to do, start keeping track of your time. I need to see where your time is being spent because when I look at this, it tells a story. So you guys tell me now. So I'll show you what I mean.
Hey, Russ, quick question.
Yes, go ahead.
Where would other jobs fit into this?
Oh, Abby, you are on.
I am. I just have a minute. I'm at my other job right now, actually, but I just got away for a minute to finish
good.
the rest of this
You
meeting.
make me feel better then. Okay, so ask your question again.
So where would other jobs fit into this? Like on my time tracker, would I put, from 7 a.m. to 3 p.m. that I'm at my other job?
Don't track
and count
that. No, yeah,
Okay.
just don't. Only keep track on this paper when you're actually doing real estate.
Okay.
Or if you
But-
think you're doing real estate.
Okay. But other than that, like it won't affect
No.
the overall percentage. Okay. I just
No,
wanted to
because-
make sure.
Because what you're looking at is you're just going to take your total time that you spent, which I can probably remove that so you guys can see better me and stuff. Ultimately, you're just going to want to know the total number of hours that you did real estate. And of that total, how many were I, how many were P, and then the N. Okay.
So we're not talking
Okay.
4 hours or anything like.
Yeah, I
that.
don't
It's
care
just-
about 24 hours,
it's
only
just-
when you're doing real estate.
Okay. Perfect. Thank you.
Okay, all right, so now you guys tell me. Now again, do not judge yourself. And if I was coaching you, I wouldn't worry about one particular day. And honestly, I wouldn't even really worry about one particular week. But at the end of the month, I want to see what the pattern is looking like, okay? Now, so you guys, let's say that at the end of the month, somebody came to you. So you guys help me in figuring this out, okay? If at the end of the month, somebody came to you or to me and said, okay, here's what it looks like. At the end of the month, 70% of my time was non-productive, 20% was indirectly productive, and 10% was productive. What would you say to that? And this might, if you don't know, it's okay.
Be more productive.
Okay, good. So, which we want to be more productive, right? But how do I do that? Because again, like I brought up to you guys, the fact that you have your license in the last 2 months, Mariano, how many people have just said, come list my house or come help me buy a house? 0, right? Is that 0 or 3?
Zero.
I'm just kidding. He went like this for you guys on Zoom. So I was like 0 or 3. I thought he meant 0. Well, so notice that doesn't just happen. So yes, I like the idea. If you were coaching the person, be more productive, but they're going to go, I don't know how to. Like, I'm trying. Okay.
The indirectly productive is gonna have to be.
That's right. You got to focus on the indirectly productive. So here's the key. Here's the key piece. You'll notice I circled these and put them together. The most important thing for you guys, and make sure you hear this, because this is what you need to do.
So when you say you guys, you guys, or are you talking realtor in general?
Realtor in general, but you guys.
Okay.
Because realtors in general don't know this, what I'm teaching you. Like, honestly, very, very, very few people know what I'm teaching you right now. I mean, they might know it intuitively, like meaning they might kind of just, top producing agents do it intuitively, but they couldn't explain it to you, I guess, so maybe what I'm
I guess when I say you guys, it's the people that is new in the business or people that have been doing it for 5 years. That's kind of.
Yes, both. So what I'm saying is for you guys as new agents, you need to do this. But even that, my buddy that I was telling you about, Craig, for him, if you ever feel like you're in a slump or I got to figure out why I'm not having as much business, immediately start tracking your time again, because it'll tell you the story. So let me show, and I'll show you what I mean. But I'm going to give you kind of a bigger view first, and then we'll zoom in. These two added together, your objective should be to, gosh, I want to write up there. All right, I'll do it down here. The objective should be these two together equaling 60%. I don't care how much was this or how much was this. For me, all that's important is the two added together equals 60%. Now, there comes a time that I care, but to begin with, all I care is that you're at 60%. So if I looked at this and saw they're at 30%, I would say immediately to you, if you came to me and said, and this is what it looked like, I would say, you need to spend more time prospecting. You're not spending enough time prospecting. Okay, now let's say, so now let me walk through with you. Let's say, for example, that after a few weeks, the person comes to me and this total, these two added together are at 60%. Okay. They're at 60%, but when I look at it, all 60% is spent here and there's 0 here. What would that tell you guys? Now remember, not just 1 week, but if after a couple of weeks, that's what it was looking like.
I need to learn how to prospect.
What do you mean by you need to learn how to prospect?
Obviously, I'm making phone calls, but I don't know how to close them or how to get a business.
That's what it is. If you find that your indirectly productive is high on the percentage, but it's not translating into this, 100%, it's one of two things. Either you're lying, which is why I say power comes out of telling the truth. You're lying. You're saying you're prospecting when you're really not. Or it's what Mariano said. You're prospecting, but you're not asking for appointments. So you're getting people on the phone, talking to them and things, but you're not asking for appointments. Now, so let me speak to the open house thing that you had brought up earlier, Sam. Anything that you do prospecting wise that is passive, like you do a mailer and you send it out, you go to an open house, anything where you're sitting and waiting for people to come to you, you only get accounted as indirectly productive for every appointment that you set. So let me explain this. Let's say that you went and sit at an open house or a model home even, okay? You go sit at an open house or a model home and you sit there for 4 hours and nobody comes through. Was that really indirectly productive or was it non-productive?
Not
No.
productive.
Okay, what about this? I sit there, and you might argue with me on this one, and that's okay. But I sit there for 4 hours and I have 4 groups of people come through, but I don't set any appointments. Now what is it? Same. What if I sit there for 4 hours, I have 4 groups come through and I set 1 appointment?
That's productive.
How much of it was productive? That's right. You get to count 1 hour. So for every appointment you set, you get 1 hour of productivity out of it, or indirectly productive. Sorry. So if you're doing an open house and every time you set an appointment, you can count 1 hour of it as indirectly productive. If you don't set an appointment, you don't get it counted. So what, okay, so now let me do this one. I'm there for 4 hours, 6 people come through and I set appointments with all 6 of them. What is it? Which, so 100% meaning am I doing 6 hours or 4? 4. Can't do more. You can't create more than, you can't, even though, yes, it's going to be awesome. But as far as the time tracking, you can't count more hours of indirectly productive than you actually did. So even if I set 10 appointments in that 4 hours, it's only 4 hours of eye time. So now you're like, well, good. Once I set 4, I'm going home, right? I'm just kidding. Okay. Now, watch this. What happened though? Let's say that in an ideal world, you would do 33% this, actually 34% that, 33% this, 33% this. Like that's ideally what it would look like. Well, that's not true. Ideally, you'd do 100% this, but that's not going to happen. Just FYI. Okay. So if the top producing agents usually are only about 34% productive. Like people making millions of dollars in real estate, which we have 2 agents within our company doing that are making over $1 million a year. And actually both of them will probably do over 2 this year. But if you looked at their time, they're still probably only 34% productive. Like that's really probably where it falls. So don't worry if this is low, because if you get to 30%, you're probably making millions of dollars a year. Okay. But that's why what's important is that you put them together. So let me ask you this. Let's say that you were tracking your time and you found that you were 30% indirectly productive, and let's say 30% here. So you're at the 60%. And that's happening over and over and over and over again, but you're not making any money. What's the problem? Okay. So let's say that you were tracking your time and you came to me and said, Russ, help me figure this out. I'm now spending 30% of my time indirectly productive. I'm also doing 30% of my time out showing properties or presenting or, this stuff. Not this one though, because if you were doing that one, then you'd have money. But you're doing all of these things, but you're not getting any closings.
Skills.
Okay, but specifically what skill?
Your skills aren't good, like honed yet. You need to hone
It
your
is a
skills
skill
more.
set issue, but what skill set is it?
You're negotiating.
Closing.
That's right.
Yeah.
Ultimately, it's one of 2 things. Again, either you're lying, or what's happening too that I found is you're going on appointments that aren't real appointments. Like meaning you should have pre-qualified the people a little better. You're spending time going out and meeting with people that are not real buyers or sellers, or when you get there, you're not asking them to sign the contract. You're not closing at the end of the presentation. But I'm telling you, if you will start tracking this today or tomorrow, I guess, starting tomorrow, keep track every 15 minutes. Where is your time being spent? And then write down, is it indirectly productive? Is it productive or is it non-productive? At the end of the day, how many total hours did you work real estate? How many hours were indirectly productive? How many were productive? And then at the end of the week, total those up and figure out what percentage of your time was spent here. And it probably is going to be very heavy, more like this, 70, 80% even maybe on the non-productive. Your goal then for the next week is I got to shorten that down. Did you have a comment or question?
Yes, so this is kind of killing me a little bit here.
Okay.
Because I'm feeling very non-productive. But being new, so right now I'm spending a lot of time trying to learn, like I said, dot loop and all this other stuff that I'm trying to do, right? I guess the question is, when does that become non-acceptable and when is it acceptable? Is that
Okay.
making sense?
Yes, I understand what you're saying. So
Like,
let me just
somebody that
make,
is new and somebody that has been doing it for 5 years, if they're doing 70% non-productive, and so
Yep.
where is that?
so did you guys on Zoom hear Mariano's question or you want me to repeat it?
I'm not sure I
Or are you repeating?
Can you repeat it?
Okay, what he asked is, as a new agent, he's spending a bunch of time learning how to do dot loop, learning the MLS, how to set up hot sheets, all that kind of stuff. Like, how, at what point, as a new agent, is it okay to be much heavier on the non-productive versus the seasoned agent, basically, right?
Right.
That's kind of the question. Okay. So the answer to that is, here's where I would say, the secret to this is, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if you're new or seasoned. It's all the same. Meaning, we think, well, I got to learn how to do that, and I got to learn the website, and I got to learn all this stuff. The key thing is what comes into play with this and why this is so important to track it is what it does is it forces you to say, I am only going to allow myself 1 hour to work on learning dot loop today. And I'll do 1 hour tomorrow or whatever. But it forces you to say, I gotta limit it, because part of what I want to make sure you guys understand, part of what goes on is your brain is designed to keep you safe. And so anytime you're in an uncomfortable situation, prospecting, going on these appointments is going to be uncomfortable because you're like, I don't know that I know what I'm doing. Your brain is going to create the busy work so that you feel like you're working when you're really not. I mean, you are, but it's not getting you where you
We're
need.
gonna convert back to that first principle. We're gonna expand that work to the time because we think we need it.
That's right. Work expands so as to fill the time available. So the answer is, Mariana, you have to just look at it and schedule it and say, okay, I will allow X amount of time to do non-productive things during the day. But really, I have to make sure that I'm spending the time.
So then right now, I should be looking at more, I should be doing 60% prospecting.
Yep.
Which kind of per se,
Yep.
and 40%.
Non-productive.
So
Yep.
that I can be somewhat indirectly productive.
Yep.
I should be right here.
Yep.
Not over here.
Yeah, so that's, at the end of the day, that's how you want to look at it, is for right now, I need to schedule it to where 60% of my time is spent prospecting because I don't have any of this other stuff. So notice, I'm still allowing you to spend almost half of your day doing this other stuff. But if you'll spend the 60% doing this, what's going to happen then is this. What starts to happen then is, as you do this prospecting, what's going to happen is this. So I start doing indirectly productive. Okay, so if this was on a line, indirectly productive should lead to what? Productive time. Okay, so as a result, I now get some productive. I go on some appointments. Okay, so I'm prospecting, I go on appointments. What then? So now let me ask you this question. What does this lead to?
Money, closing.
Well, money, but it also actually leads to this. Because as soon as you get it under contract, now you got to start worrying about getting the inspection, and you got to go order the preliminary title report, and you got to turn it into the office, and like all of a sudden it does create non-productive things you have to do as well for that. Okay, so I start doing that. What typically is going to go away as I start doing the non-productive stuff? No, not the money. I mean, it will eventually, but not to begin with. To begin with, what do I quit doing?
Prospecting.
Prospecting. Because we're like, well, I can't prospect because I got to go work on my deal. So we end up doing this non-productive stuff until we get down here. What's this moment right there? Say it. No, that is what it is.
The oh shit moment.
That's the oh shit moment. And what's the oh shit?
You're not doing your.
Yeah, I don't have any business
have
because
anything.
what happens is the property closes right here. Remember? So this closes, that's productive time. Closing, whoo, I get paid. Oh shit, I don't have any other deals in play. Now what do I got to do? So now what do?
Prospect.
We start prospecting again. And what does the prospecting lead to? Appointments, woohoo! And I prospect and I get appointments and I prospect and I get appointments. And then, oh, now I got all this end time I gotta do. This is how agents do business like that. Is because I'm telling you, if you will focus on this and making sure that stays at 60% no matter what, you won't do this. Agents constantly do this in this business. Have money, don't have money, have money, don't have money. If you want to avoid that, this is how you do it. But you got to keep track, because the moment you start spending more time doing this, at the end of the day, you start to notice, oh crap, I spent 5 hours today doing non-productive things. I gotta fix that. So now here's the thing. If you actually could track it, and I alluded to this earlier with Sam, of if you spend 8 hours a day just going closing after closing after closing, you're gonna make a ton of money. But here's probably what I would say is typically at the end of the year, if you at the end of the year took the total number of hours that you spent doing this and divided the income that you made into the total number of hours you did this, how much per hour do you think you make while you're doing that?
A lot.
Okay, give me what would you guess?
Depends on how often you do that.
That's true, but at the end of the year though, if you had, let's say 20 closings, and so let's say 20 closings equated to $200,000, okay? And maybe that's, let's say 100,000, okay? I had 20 closings, I made $100,000. How many hours of productive time did I have to spend to get that? It's probably somewhere around 100 hours to get $100,000. So how much per hour is that going to be? About $1,000 an hour. So here's what I want you guys to see. The time you spend doing this, you're making probably somewhere in the neighborhood of $1,000 an hour. Now, how much money do you get paid if you did this 8 hours a day? Yeah, zero. Now, at some point though,
Unless that leads to that and that.
yeah, so here's the key though. Sometimes people will ask me, how do I know when I should hire an assistant? This is how you figure out when to hire an assistant too, is when you're busy enough doing this, that you're having a hard time getting this stuff done because you're doing this in order to keep yourself at the 60% minimum. That's when you know I need to go hire an assistant. Because how much per hour would you have to pay somebody to do, like, let's just, to put together a hot sheet for you? Like to hire an assistant, how much per hour are you gonna pay somebody? Get just
20 hours, 25 hours.
yeah, somewhere probably in that neighborhood, $20 to $20 an hour. So here's part of what I want you guys to realize. When you are tracking your time and at the end of the day, you calculate it up, the amount of time you spend doing this stuff, you might as well go get another job that's paying you $20 to $25 an hour, because right now you're doing it for free. That makes sense? But notice on this end of the spectrum, I'm making about $1,000 for every hour that I'm spent doing it. So that's where, when you can understand this, is when you can kind of go, okay, I got to spend as much time as I can in this area because that's where I make the money. That's why for an attorney, they have to keep track of their billable hours every 6 minutes, is because the law firm understands this. The time they're spending doing this productive stuff is where an attorney is making the big bucks. When you're not doing that, then you're over here, this is the paralegal stuff. That's why they go hire a paralegal. See, that's where you're gonna go hire somebody then and pay them 20 to 25 bucks an hour to go do this kind of stuff for you. Maybe not lunch, but you're gonna pay them to do that stuff for you because you're like, I don't have time. I need to be out doing this stuff. So if you probably then did the same thing on this, took your income at the end of the year and divided it into the number of hours you prospected, you're probably in the $250, $200 an hour of your time that was spent. And I know this isn't exactly correct, but it's to give you the picture of it. You're making, $125, $250 an hour. When you can see that, hey, I'm making $250 an hour for doing this, you're gonna gladly give up this time. Does that make sense? Because this then leads to that. Okay, what questions? If I overwhelmed you? Frustrated,
No.
nobody's gonna go off, jump off the balcony over here?
I'm gonna go be unproductive and eat lunch. but-
Yeah, I'm gonna go eat lunch too.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking. I'm like, all right, I got 15 minutes for lunch. now,
Yeah.
only.
Yeah, productive.
When should I start saying, oh shit, you know, I'm not being productive at all? I mean, being the new, and I'm
Yeah.
kind of focusing on the new guy. So it's like, when should I start really freaking out?
Yep.
That, oh my
Well,
gosh, you know,
so here's
got-
what I would
gotta-
say, don't, after one day, don't freak out. Even after a week, don't freak out. But what you wanna see is it progressively getting, are these two added together progressively getting higher? And as long as you see that getting towards this, you're good. Like, so yeah, don't stress over it, that, you know, over the next week that you're gonna be like, crap, I'm only at 30% here. Just, but as long as the next week it's at 31 or 32 even, or well, probably more than that, but 33, 45, great. But just what you want to be doing is progressively getting to where you're like, okay, I'm at 60% now between these two. And here's the thing I will 100% guarantee you. You get to these two together being 60%, you're making money. And if you're not, this is where I was saying, if you find you're at 60% between these two together and you're finding that I'm not getting appointments, come and talk to me and say, help me figure it out, because it's a skill set issue. The problem is you're just not, and I'll tell you the answer right now is you're not asking for appointments. Or you're asking only one time versus asking 3 times while you're prospecting. We just got to fine tune those things is what it will be. So best way to answer your question, Mariano, start tracking it. And then when you're frustrated, come talk to me and I'll help you figure it out. I will coach you through, but like I said, when an agent comes to me and frustrated, I can't figure out this business. The first thing I'm going to do is pull this paper out and go, okay, start tracking your time. Because I can't help you till I know where your time's being spent. But once I see that and know, then I can start to help you, because sometimes they feel like, well, I got to spend all this time on .loop. You know what my answer to that is? No, you don't. Hire one of the TCs to do it for you. Boom, we just got rid of that. Because the truth is, you're not going to pay the TC for doing any of the .loop stuff until you get a closing anyway. So who cares? Go have them do it.
So even now, it's a new agent. I mean, how much do you pay them to do a transaction?
So I think the number is $300 and something but you only pay it if it closes. So
So right now, for like Rick was saying, the average that you make per closing is like $10,000. Right? $300 off those 10,000. It's
well, especially when you look at the amount of time, if you're spending all this time trying to worry about .loop. See, but that's why to me, I'm saying, just start tracking it and then and Rick understands this too. So either get with me or Rick. And I think Ruby does too. Is she the one you're working with? Are you working with Ruby? Yeah. Ruby, I think does too, but if not, I'll help her with it. But it's just a matter of you tracking it. And all I need to see is the percentages. And then I can start to figure it out with you to be like, hey, we got to figure out how, and I may say, well, show me what you're doing on this. Let me see your schedule to look at the end time where it's popping up. And like I say, if it's stuff like that, we figure out a way to get you out of having to do that, to say, okay, because the truth is, even the .loop doesn't matter till you get a transaction, so who cares?
So I'm thinking about all this stuff.
Yeah.
Why even bother spending hours learning the ins and outs of all these applications that don't mean anything
Until you get a deal.
So don't even worry about it.
Yeah. Yep. I mean, that's easier said than done, because then as soon as you go to
Then you have
do
to
a
write
search on the
contract,
MLS and you're,
you have to write
well,
an
but part of
offer.
it actually though, is just what Sam said. I would have had no idea you didn't know about Hot Sheet. But if we were tracking this and you came in and I was saying, let's figure it out, is when I would start to look at it and I would go, why are you searching the MLS every day for an hour? Well, I got to find the properties for the buyers. Well, that's where,
Application, set up a hot sheet,
yeah, I'd go, we'll set up a hot sheet and you don't have to worry about it. Oh, beautiful.
but that's why we have you guys, because you guys can help us with those things,
Figure it
why
out.
we're prospecting and doing this.
But the key thing is, because you guys are independent contractors, meaning like if this was a traditional business where you were our employees, we would know what you're doing all the time. But because you're independent contractors, if you don't show up tomorrow, I'm not going to call you tomorrow. Like, meaning if I was used to Chick-fil-A, if you guys, if all, 5 of you guys were supposed to work at Chick-fil-A tomorrow. Back up. If tomorrow all 5 of you don't show up to the office at all, I'm probably not even gonna notice. I mean, I hate to say it that way, but I'm probably not even gonna notice that you weren't there after one day.
So you're not gonna miss my smiling face.
Well, I won't, probably not tomorrow, maybe on Monday, but here's the point. But if we worked at Chick-fil-A and the 5 of you didn't show up tomorrow, I'd be on the phone, like, where are you at? Why aren't you here? That's kind of the difference. So to some extent, Sam, you got to remember, you got to track some of this stuff and then come to us and go, okay, help me figure out what does this mean and what do I do? How do I work with it? And we'll coach you on it to where, like, I'm telling you, this piece, that tracking is gold.
So can you give me like one example, like real quick, like right now, just before this, I called one of my SOIs. And long story short, he's moving to Florida. So he goes, I need a 2-bedroom home close to the beach, right?
Okay.
Okay, so now what I do with this, so now I have this guy that wants me to find him a property. So how much of this time, or should I be spending in MLS looking for a
None.
property? None.
You should spend
So what-
0 time.
So what do I
You
do?
should go over to our relocation department and say, here's his name, here's his phone number, here's the city he wants to go to. And they'll actually give you a link. You can go do it online, but I would hand it off to relocation and then maybe call him in a couple of weeks or a few days even and just say, hey, did you hear from an agent yet? You did? Great. Are they taking care of you? If they're not, let me know. Like, that's the amount of effort you should put into that.
That's like 2 Gs too.
Yeah,
Yeah.
straight up. I was like, that's
Yeah,
like,
that's for
That's
if
awesome.
they close with an agent.
Yeah,
There,
you'll
that's
probably
actually-
make a couple $1,000s.
That's
For-
$2,000, 5 minutes of your time.
Yeah. Yeah, so, yeah, to some extent, honestly, I've thought that a few times of like, man, you can make, I mean, let's say that it'll probably be more than 5 minutes, but you may spend on it a half an hour and make $2,000. So maybe we should do that all day long. Problem is you don't want to do that all day long. Yeah, you should do 0 searching of properties. Get him connected with an agent down there and move on. I mean, not really move on, stay in touch, make sure, because the reason you want to stay in touch is because if he's not having a good experience with that agent, then you got to go up here to Relo and say, we got to get a new agent assigned. He doesn't like him. But as long as you call and they go, yeah, no, they're great.
So you go to the relocation department, but I would have you get that set up, and then you call this guy and say, hey, man, I got you.
Yep.
I'm getting you hooked up with an agent.
Yeah, so
over there."
first actually call him and just say, hey, are you okay if I get you an agent that specializes in that area?
Okay.
And then he'll say yes, then bam, and then yep, go hand it off to relocation. Yeah, that's way cool. So does he need to sell a house here too?
No, he's gonna keep his house here.
Oh.
That's just a second,
Okay,
like
cool.
summer home.
Yeah, perfect. Yeah, just get him in touch with an agent. Get him in touch, get our relocation to get him in touch with an agent there. And you can tell that agent to call you first, and so you can kind of bring them up to speed. Sometimes I do, it depends on the scenario. Sometimes I do, sometimes I don't, but
Funny thing is, I didn't wanna call him because I was like, oh, shit. And I just called him.
Yeah.
And he goes, hey, I saw you put on Facebook that you're not a realtor, but I figured you couldn't do anything in Florida. I said, oh, yeah. I said, we can go international. He goes, whoa, heck, he goes, this is what I'm looking for. Do it."
yeah. So perfect, yeah, so I would just let him know, hey, I've done a little bit of looking, but it's really gonna be better if I connect you with one of our top agents down there and then do it that way.
do they choose 721 agents first when we use the relocation?
They will
service?
try to do that first, but it depends on the area. If in some areas,
Might not happen.
there might not be a Century 21 as part of the system, meaning there's probably a Century 21, but they may not be a part of the relocation system. And so it could end up being a different company, but they try to get it to be a Century 21. Okay, what other questions? Okay.
That helped though, cause like I'm spending 100% time being non-productive right now,
Right,
100%.
Right.
And of course, I think it's necessary to learn, but if I put more time into indirectly prospecting, I'm gonna learn anyways. And that'll
Yeah.
come too.
Yep.
so.
well, and that's just it. Even if right now, all you did was said, okay, I'm gonna make sure at least an hour every day is done of this. And then the next week you say, okay, now it's 2 hours. Like, that's why I'm saying, don't worry about so much. Track it to get a feel for where it's at. what's more important is the trajectory that you're on, not necessarily what it ends up being today or next week. But as long as every week it's getting better and better, that's what matters. So don't be depressed.
Like yesterday, Samantha, she was, at one time of the day, she was like, oh my gosh, how do I do this? How do I do this buyer broker agreement? You know, I don't know how to fill it out. So like she had gone to one of these other people and to help her do it. Am I making sense? So should she have been too worried about how to fill that,
Oh, yeah.
or should she have gone with this other people and, hey, help me fill this out so I don't have to spend so much time doing this?
Either way, meaning like, I guess to me, to some extent, how much time did you spend on it?
I don't know, not that much on it.
Well, how much is not that much?
Like 10 minutes.
Oh, yeah, then I would say. But if you told me you spent 2 hours on it, I'd be like, yeah, you don't spend 2 hours on it. So. And to some extent, part of I would say, keep in mind, like the buyer broker, I'm gonna teach a whole class on that. Where we're gonna do a 2-hour class on the buyer paperwork, and an hour of it's gonna be spent on the first page of that. To where like, I'm gonna get you trained on it, so. Don't stress about, I gotta learn it today necessarily.
Okay, that's kind of what I was.
Yeah.
Okay.
And it helps that there's people around us that, like in my
Yeah.
situation where I was like, okay, guys, did I do this right? Come look at this. And then,
Yeah, and I think that's always my advice is go through and fill it out and then call. So like I had an agent call me the other day and said, hey, I need some help on a seller financing addendum. And I was like, yeah, what questions do you have? And then he proceeded to have me help him fill out every single
Okay.
thing. And like, my preference would be go try to fill it out yourself first, then bring it to me and we'll fix it, kind of a thing. Versus just, I know it's more comfortable for you guys to be just, okay, tell me how to do this and let's go one line at a time. I would rather you go sit down and try to fill it out first, but don't spend 2 hours on it. But go through and try to, quickly fill it out as best as you can. Then let us look at it and we'll fix where you need to fix it. If that makes sense. Okay, cool. Well, thanks for being here. Next week is going to be the mortgage class. So Inspiro will be teaching on Tuesday and dot loop on Thursday. So I think the dot loop class on Thursday is going to be only done on Zoom. So I'm actually in California doing the trainings next week. So Inspiro will do Tuesday here in the room. But next Thursday, I think is going to be only on Zoom because they typically teach it from out of the Orem office. It's going to be Ellery, who's kind of in charge of dot loop. So anyway, that's the plan for next week.
Where in California you go?
Ventura.
Ventura?
Yeah, I'm going to be at the Westlake office.
Westlake, right on.
Yeah, I'm teaching the agents down there. I'll be doing all this stuff.
All the trainings, I mean, they have been great, but this one has probably been one of the best trainings. Or where I got the most. How's that?
Sure. No, I'm good with that. You'll keep saying that to me.
Yeah. So it's only the first
Not next week you won't, but the next week after that, when I'm back, you'll be like, Russ, this was the one that I knew. Actually, here's what I found actually that's
This
funny
is the
about
most
that.
beneficial so far.
You know what's funny is kind of all of the classes, the pieces fit together. What I have found is whatever the last class is that you take, you'll be like, if I would have had this first, it would have made a big difference. But it's because they all piece together. So everything that we do kind of builds, all the classes are kind of gonna fit together. And it's not necessarily you have to do this one before that one kind of a thing, but yeah, certain pieces will all start to make sense more as we go through. So anyway, but thank you, I appreciate that. Okay.
So we're excused to go home now.
You're, yeah,
Is the bell ring
go do
yet?
some non-productive stuff.